was in 2-player mode when Hi everyone, it's Jacqueline Hyman. I am doing Project Milestone 4 video. So this is my game. I'm going to show you the start screen first because I have it up. So the start screen exists and we have a start game button. So that is the single player and the split screen buttons. That will start a single player and split screen game. I also have my options and a quit. And I'll show you the quit works when I show you the build. Because we're in Unity, it doesn't work. So start game. So both single player starts the game, and the split screen will start the game. Bam. There we go. And the options button takes you to the options scene, and then this has the sliders that adjust music and sound effects and level of the day or random map. So if you click random map, it'll give you a random map that is set to true by default. So if you don't come in here and change it, it's just going to spawn a random map. And if you hit level of the day, it's going to take the day, month, and year, add it together, and that is the level that you get today. And you'll only get it today. So on my option screen, I have my sound effects volume. So that is this. So 0 is 0, and all the way to the right is 1. So this means it's at full volume, and this means it's at none volume, and in between there is some volume in between there. So how this works, and I'm just going to talk about my sound effects and my music at the same time because they work exactly the same. They are a UI element called a slider, which you can find inside of the create UI assets. Right, so here is my slider. It has my slider script that is on there, and it's just, set white, everything. Okay, so I have its direction from left to right. So this is 0, and this is 1. I actually have the wrong one selected. Okay, so you can see here that the value, when I change it under inspector, it changes it on screen. So, and what I did to make it work with the volume of all of these lovely sound effect audio sources is that they're all linked to this one slider, and it updates its level. Right, so whatever this value is, it sets their music volume to be that number. And because they both can only go up to 1, it's, just 1 to 1. You don't have to do like any math or anything. So I'll show you these scripts. That's my camera controller. Audio manager. Okay, so here, the first thing I do is I get the sliders information because the game manager does not start in the screen. And so it does not, in this, audio manager also doesn't start on the screen. So what it does is it gets a reference from the game manager of the sliders that are in this menu, and so it just finds them, and then it calls get slider as soon as the level is loaded. And what this does, it sets those instances inside the audio manager so that it can now adjust the values of those, and then it checks to see if the player preference has been set for volume or sound effects before, and if it hasn't, it sets 1, and it sets them to 1, so that's full volume. If it does have a player preference already set, it just gets that float value and it sets the music volume to whatever that volume is. And for the sound effects, because I have multiple audio sources, it just iterates through them using a for loop. So it just goes through and sets it for each one. And then I have this multiple places. So on start, I also do this because if it does exist, it's already there. So it just does it as soon as it starts. And then also on update, we are just setting the music and the sound effects volume to be the value of their slider. And we're doing that every frame. And then lastly, I have a volume preference. This gets set when you click main menu. So all that does, it just saves your player preferences as you leave the screen. Okay. So my sound list I have here. So I have all my audio sources under my audio manager game object. And so I have audio source, which just plays all of the music. So that's the menu music, the level music, and the game over screen music. Player death audio plays the player death. This one plays the enemy death. Power up audio plays power up, and bullet audio plays bullet. So it's pretty straightforward. I made those so you would know exactly what they do. So that's our sound list. Cool. So cool. So the next thing I have to show you guys is that the UI gets updated in game and it functions correctly on both the single player and the 2-player game. So let's start with a single player game, and what we'll do is we'll go straight in and kill someone. Bam, gotta score 1. I'll do it again. Man, the sound effects in this game are so loud. I think I have them set at full volume. Now, gotta score. I think it was too close and I killed the guy who's spawned. There we go. So like as I just kill them, so you can see the score updating up here, and it works correctly. Okay, so let's look at health. Can't look at health behind a wall. Right? So as I'm getting hit from bullets from these guys, it's decrementing my life down here, my health, right? And I just died, so now you can see up here that my lives is no longer 4, but it's 3. So let's see if I can find another guy. The whole map, it only spawns 4, so I'll show you the house again. That's not apparently one of the ones that attack. Oh yes, my power-ups, right? So my power-ups, I'll have to explain this to you a little bit later. I'm not quite there yet, but they make sounds. Alright, guy. Shoot me. Alright, so yeah, right here you see it going down, going down, down, going down. Alright, and then I died again, and then here we go. And then I have my game timer, which updates correctly, but that is for the final, and I'll talk about that more. So that was single player. Let's look at split screen. And here, okay. So first thing you'll notice is that the UI scales with the screen size. So the score is here, the lives here, game time is here, and you can still see the health. Big accomplishment because it broke right as I was going to record this video, and then I had to stop and fix it, which was sad. So as you guys can see, their health updates when they get hit with bullets. Let's see, I got updated score here on player 1. So I got 4 now. You can see that updates. Let me go find some death. And then my health is going down here. And I died. So I respawned, and then my lives is now 3 instead of 4. Alright, cool. So let's go and do player 2 now. You can see that he has a different sprite. He also has the same time as the other player on his side of the screen, which is awesome. Where's that guy standing on? The one thing I wasn't able to do was get the UI on top of the enemies' heads to rotate to this camera, as well as the other one. It's something that I want to work on and try to fix, because I think that would just really put it over the top. As you can see, my health has gone down after being shot. I can shoot. Oh, that was the wrong one. Oh no, I died. I pressed spacebar and started shooting from player 1, and then I was all like, why isn't it working on player 2? That's because they have a different different control scheme. It's the keypad 0 that is issuing for. Right, so you see the score updated up in the top left of the side screen. Oh, right. Also, you can see right now that milestone 1 still works. I can shoot, I can move. Milestone 2, we've got AI working. And they're mostly doing different things. So some of them are patrolling. It's just like when they get near each other, they tend to get a little bug I need to fix. Let me die. Right, and there we go. I lost a life. Okay. So we're just going to stop that. So all of that, all of the UI works and updates in both games. Okay. 2-player mode utilizes separate controls and split screen cameras. So the first thing I want to point out is that I do not have 2 scenes for this. I have one scene that has 2 cameras that change their rect. So to be a specific size when 2-player is true. So let me go to level 1 and show you player 1's camera here. So I have this camera. I have it's just sitting in the world, right? It just sits in level 1 and it stays in level 1 and it never leaves level 1. And the same thing for player 2 camera. It just sits in here. It plays. It just stays in here and always stays in here. So I have 2 cameras. 1, 2. And then they're labeled player 1 camera and player 2 camera. So now I will show you inside my game manager on main menu. Let me click here and open this. Okay, so when level 1 is loaded, which is this function right here. Alright, so when level 1 is loaded, I get the cameras. So player 1 camera here. And it's just always going to get player 1 camera because no matter what, player 1 will be in the game. Okay, and then if it is a single player game, it sets the camera rect to be 0, 0, 1, 1. So all this is the X, Y position of where the camera starts, and this is its width and height. So it just sets it so it takes up the whole screen because it's a single player game, and it should do that. So for if it's a multiplayer game and not a single player game, it finds player 2's camera, and then I was going to add in the vertical versus horizontal split. So if its vertical split is true, which I have it set as default to be true right now, it sets player 1's camera's rect to be 0, to start at 0, 0, which is the bottom left hand corner of your screen, and be half the screen wide and the whole screen tall, right? And then player 2's I set to be start at half the screen width, so it instead of starting at this bottom left hand corner area, it will start about in the middle, like here. Okay, and then it will be half the screen wide, so the rest of the way, and then it'll be the whole width high. Cool. And then so what I did for horizontal is if they select horizontal, which isn't an option yet, but I'm going to be adding it in just to polish it so I can put it on my portfolio. So what that does is it just changes the rects as well. So it just sets it so instead of starting at 0, 0 for player 1, it starts at 0, 1 half. So that's here about, and then the top half of the screen will be player 1, and it'll be 1 wide, but only half tall. And then for player 2, it'll start at 0, 0 down here. It'll be half tall, and then it'll be the whole screen wide. Okay. So that's how that works. It's really simple, really straightforward, and then all it does is changes the rect of the camera, and I'll show you on the game object where that adds at. So it changes its viewport rect here. It's right here. Cool. And it does that at runtime. Yay. So that works, and you've seen that work. I don't think I showed you that the options persist through like, right. So what that means is it saves your options, and I kind of talked about how that did that, but I don't think I showed you. So in options here, I'm going to set these to be all the way up. Actually, I'm going to turn them both off. All right, they're both off. Hit main menu to save, then exit the game. Okay. And then when we start, you notice that there's no music playing, and usually it starts right away because it's set to be on awake, and I can show you that right now. So here it says play on awake, and it has not played anything, and that is because the volume is turned all the way down, and you can see here that the volume is turned all the way down, right? And if I turn it up, menu, quit the game, get options, and then you see it's still that, like that. Cool. So, how does player press work? Sorry about that. Sorry, got distracted. Okay. So essentially what player prefs are is it's a special caching system to keep track of simple settings for the player between game sessions. A lot of new programmers think that it's how you can like save the game system, but it's not really for that. It really only keeps track of like simple things like graphics or sound settings. I think you can do login information or just like user related data. So how it works is it uses something called serialization, and what that is it's the conversion of a object to a stream of bytes. Essentially it just turns it into ones and zeros and memory space so that the game can access it later. So so player prefs uses serialization and deserialization to turn things into like binary code and then from binary code turn it back into C++ or C# or whatever. Cool. So that's essentially what player prefs does. It just kind of saves objects, and so that can be used to be stored in a database or in memory and even a file. So that's what deserialization and serialization is, and that's how player prefs works. Cool. So as you saw earlier, the game tracks the score for both players. Let's do this. I ran into the wall. I was not looking at the screen. I was trying to read a paper to make sure I'm on track. Okay. Score is 0. Man. Really fun. They all spawn next to each other? Holy moly. I killed them. It changed the score to 1. And I'll just show you again quickly. Tubs here. Oh, that's me. As player 1. There's one. Oh, yeah, there's 2 there. And the score updated for player 2. Okay. So the last thing is that the game manager exists is a singleton and allows easy access to a list of player tank data components and updated list of enemy tank data components and a list of all power-ups spawned. It also controls game logic and game-wide variables. Cool. Okay, so my game manager does all of that. So we'll just kind of start at the top and work our way down. So the first thing I have is all of my variables that need to be public up here. and global are up here. So the first little block here is all of the lists of things. So the first one is the player spawn position. So when the map is generated, it's for each tile, it accesses its room script, and then it adds that player spawn object transform to this list. So it will have 9 things in it with our current setup of a 3x3 grid. The enemy spawn position, same thing. It just, as it's spawning the tiles, it gets the room script to check and see if there are any enemy spawn positions on there, and then if they are, they will add it to this list. Same thing for power-ups. It just does the same thing. And the ones underneath that are the available power-ups and enemy spawns. So when an enemy spawns at a spawn location, or a power-up gets spawned there, it removes that location from this list, and that way, when a new one gets spawned, it doesn't spawn where there is already a power-up or already where there's an enemy. So that was to help limit the number of enemies that are spawning on a single tile, or power-ups, so they don't spawn in the same place, so you don't walk into one and get like 3 power-ups. Underneath that is our enemies, players, and power-ups lists. So the enemies list holds all of the enemies that are currently in the level. So when one dies, it gets removed from it. And when another one spawns, because there always has to be at least 4 enemies in the game at once, it will add it back to that list. And then for the players, it is... when a player spawns, it will add it to the list. So in a single player game, it only adds the first player, and in a 2-player game, it adds the 2 players, and it just keeps track of the players in that list. And then I have the power-ups. So whatever power-ups are in the level get added to this list, and it only adds the ones that get added to the level, and it will remove them when they leave the level. All right. So I have this other list that is my power-up type. So that's just actually a, it holds all of the prefabs, so it knows which ones to spawn. And then underneath that is how many power-ups and enemies that need to be in the world. So this can actually be set by the designer. I have it as 1 in 4 currently, but it can really be anything. And then these things... here are all of the prefabs for the enemies and players. Underneath that is the parents that they get parented to when they instantiate in the world. And then it just kind of just goes on and on. We have single player, multiplayer booleans, vertical split screen, or vertical or horizontal split screen booleans. We have if level 1 is loaded boolean, so if it is, it'll set to true. We have the timer stuff. We have the cameras for the players. We've got the enemy health bars for that. We get a reference to our map generator. We have references to the UI inside of our options menu, as well as all of our audio stuff and UI, and then our game over screens. Cool. So my game manager is a singleton, and here you go. Right now we're setting the game manager instance to null, and then if it's null, it will set the instance to this game manager. If it's not null, then it's going to destroy the object, and then so it'll just destroy one of them, but not this one, the other one. Cool. What else do I need? Player, tank components, power-up, spawns, controls game logic. Oh, cool. So essentially what happens in here is on update, it's going to check to see if there's enough enemies in the level and enough power-ups in the level. If not, it's going to call the spawn functions. And then it's also going to check to see if level 1 was loaded, and if it has been loaded, it's going to start the game timer. So I have this on level was loaded function, which is being depreciated, but currently still works. This is kind of how I set it up for each of the levels that I need to check to see if it's loaded and do stuff as soon as it's loaded. I'm using this here. So for level 0, which is the main menu, it gets all of the audio sources, it sets the clip and it plays the audio. So when you go back to the main menu, it'll do this every time. So if you go back after you finish a game, you can restart the game and it'll get that. And it gets all the buttons that are on that, and it sets their on click to go to a specific function. It also will destroy all of the tiles in the level. So like from the map generator. So if you want to restart the game, it doesn't like spawn tiles on top of tiles. It'll just destroy those tiles, and then if there are already tiles in the world. So if map.grid is null and there's no tiles in the world, then it won't do that. And then it also just gets all the components from each player. And it sets the score, lives, and health back to the correct amount. And then so when level 1 is loaded, it creates a map and it changes the clip and it plays it. It gets the cameras. It sets all of the enemy health bars over their heads. It sets the players' cameras to the right size. It gets the timer, and also gets the game over screens that are on the UI, and it turns them off so you can't see them. And then it says level 1 was loaded. And then for level 2, which is the game over screen, it just sets the UI on the game over screen to show the player what their score was and how much time they had left. And also if they get the main menu button or not. And level 3 is the options menu. So this is getting all of the things like components on the options menu and setting their listeners at runtime. And then level 4 is the credits screen, which I didn't show you yet, but it just gets the button and it adds a listener to it. So when you click it, it'll actually go to the main menu. Cool. So then my game manager handles spawning enemies, spawning players, and spawning power-ups. It also does scene management. So when you click buttons, it references the game manager to go to the different scenes. I also have the single player game and the split player game. So it just sets some booleans and then loads the scene. Game over here, it checks to see like who's dead and who's not, and gives the person who is not dead the main menu button. So the player 1 can't press it, but as soon as player 2 dies, they can, and then they can go restart the game. And then scene management. So it sets, so if random map is true, then it will set the boolean in the map generator to be true. If it's not, then set to false. Same thing for level of the day. And then and when the timer runs out, it'll load the game over screen, and then I have my quick game here. Yeah, that is my game manager. It handles a lot of stuff in the game. Okie dokie. So that is pretty much everything. Thank you for watching. That was a lot. But I hope you have a great day. Bye.